What's going on, Mission Hills? This is Mr. Settle from the Criminal Justice Academy. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit this week about what Red Ribbon Week is. And a lot of people don't really know the importance of it, but essentially it is a time for people to recognize how important it is to stay drug-free in America. There's quite an interesting history behind Red Ribbon Week, and it has to do with a drug enforcement agent by the name of Kiki Camarena, who was captured, kidnapped, and ultimately tortured by a Mexican drug cartel back in the mid-'80s. So Agent Camarena went to school here in California, Southern California, out in Southeast California. And when he was found tortured and murdered by a Mexican drug cartel, President Ronald Reagan at the time notified the nation about what had happened to him and declared this so-called war on drugs. And the school that he went to, all the children that went to the school tied red ribbons on a chain link fence to memorialize him, and that ended up kind of catching fire and spread throughout schools throughout the entire country. So we celebrate it towards the end of October, not because that was the time that Agent Camarena was murdered, but because that was the time that Congress passed legislation regarding laws surrounding drugs here in our country. So the easiest way for people, especially students, to prevent any kind of contact with drugs is to simply stay away from it. That's the easiest way. However, as we all know, there are people out in the community that sell drugs and use drugs, and access to drugs today has been more prevalent than ever before, especially here in Southern California. We have a tremendous amount of drugs that come up through Mexico and also through other means, other borders, through Canada and on planes and ships in our ports. So we have our Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol are always looking to apprehend these offenders. Again, the easiest way to prevent any kind of contact with drugs is just stay away from it. What's especially important for students to know these days is there's this, it's not necessarily new, but it's a newer drug out there called fentanyl. And fentanyl essentially is man-made heroin. It's extremely strong, and just one speck of it, one little granule of sugar is enough to cause a person to overdose. And the people who make these drugs try to make them so that they appeal, especially to a younger crowd, which is why if you watch the news these days, our Customs and Border Patrol agents are finding rainbow-colored fentanyl because they're making it colorful so that it appeals to a younger crowd, hoping that they can sell more of it by marketing it in that fashion. It's extremely dangerous, and not only is the drug fentanyl sold by itself, but a lot of times these drug dealers are sprinkling it on other drugs like marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine. So we're finding in law enforcement these days that people who have actually, might smoke marijuana are overdosing on fentanyl. And it's extremely strong. Like I said before, it causes basically your breathing muscles to shut down, and if you don't receive medical help almost immediately, you can die. And over the last few years, we've seen just thousands of fentanyl overdoses and deaths. Some of those overdoses are actually happening to police officers and deputy sheriffs across the country. So very dangerous, very difficult to detect, and even more reason to stay vigilant against this war on drugs.